And you treat them like they were some ditch rag. You do. $300 dress on a wire hanger. All of this is coming out. Out.
Please.
Out. You're gonna need more. Why? Goodbye. Why? Christina, get out of that bed. Get out of that bed. You live in the most beautiful house in Brentwood, and you don't care!
Hey, how are my best girlfriends?
Hey, Mrs. George. This is Katie.
Hello, sweetheart. Hi. Welcome to our home. I just want you to know, if you need anything, don't be shy, okay? There are no rules in this house. I'm not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom. Right, Regina?
Please stop talking.
Okay. I'm gonna make you girls a hump day treat.
This is your room? It was my parents' room, but I made them trade me.
I think it's funny, there's a generation that laughed the second they saw Faye Dunaway in that opening scene. Then there's others that are like, what's this movie about? This looks Yes, good old Mommy Dearest. Yeah, we see the real spectrum of the parenting styles there between Mommy Dearest and the cool mom from Mean Girls. By the way, I think it's very interesting that when film writers set out to, they had to have that writing question, like, okay, what kind of parent would produce a child like Regina George, who is a mean girl? I think it's interesting they didn't go with the Mommy Dearest. They went with the cool mom, the permissive mom, the mom that has breeded contempt and disdain in a child. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting commentary where that came from. But we've been in a series called Backscratcher, and it really is based on that old saying of, how about I scratch your back and you scratch mine? Which is how back should be scratched, if you think. But instead, because we are not relying on other people, or people have let us down, we look to back scratchers. And so my back scratcher of the week this week is, I think it's very appropriate. It's the animal that is known most for scratching you, a cat. So you've got a cat with a cat scratchers, and yes, Marla, I got this one especially for you. If you don't know, I've made fun of cats over the years, and she has terrorized my Facebook page with cats. So there you go. That'll be the only nice cat scratch you ever get in your whole life. So now, I don't know how many cats she has, but if you ask Malcolm, he says she has 15. She denies it, but anyways, 4, 15, I can't keep track, right? Anyways, so we started a couple weeks ago and said what kids need most from their parents, the back scratching that the parents need from their children is honor. And then what kids need most from their parents, we looked at that last week, which was the blessing, and to be able to bless your kids. What we'll see this morning is another thing that children need from their parents is to simply understand how life works. So that's the bare bones essence of the principle for this morning, is understand how life works. Now, parenting is probably one of the most demanding and challenging tasks anybody will ever take on. I think it appropriately begins with labor and doesn't get any easier after that, right? All children come in through labor, right? And then it just gets harder from that point on. And it seems like my kids are kind of getting to that later stage now, and it seems like right as soon as you figure out parenting, they no longer are that child anymore, right? You figure out parenting a preschooler, and then right when you're like, all right, we're getting this down, I'm feeling pretty good, they're no longer a preschooler, they're now in elementary school, and it takes a completely different set of parenting tools. And then you get that down, and then middle school comes in, and middle school that one's weird. That's a weird time. I mean, I know it's called adolescence and puberty, all those things come in, but it makes parenting really weird. And then if you've done really well here, Then the teenage years, you kind of find a groove and it goes pretty good. If you've messed some things up here in some way, shape, or form, you really find out what you messed up here, right? Like at the teenage years. And you kind of go from there. But I want to look at the foundational principles because in reality, you're not raising a 5-year-old. You're not raising a 10-year-old. You're raising a future husband. You're raising a future wife. You're raising a future parent. You're raising a future functioning member of society. That's what you're raising. And sometimes we get confused and, well, I'm just raising these kids. No, you're not raising kids. You're raising somebody who's going to have to function in the world on their own, which is why our primary duty as parents, in addition to blessing them, is to give them an understanding of what reality is. And there's 2 foundational verses that I kind of want to look at this morning about this. One of them is Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, and the other is Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Anyway, sorry. All week long and looking at that, I don't know, you're doing that now, but you may not like the reality of the verse. So let's go on. Proverbs 1:7, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning or the foundation of true knowledge. But fools, aka kids, despise wisdom and instruction or discipline, depending on how you translate that word. And the word translation here is quite tricky because when you start off with this word fear, that's a real misleading translation to it. I can't tell you exactly what the best word is. Some words require explanations, not a direct translations. When you're going from one language to another, you don't always have the best word in the other language to describe that. Sometimes you sort of need an explanation, not just a word for something. And that's kind of what this word is. And you think about fear. Now, when you say fear in our English, we typically go to some sense of, like you're telling me that mommy dearest is the way that you begin parenting. Is that really the foundation? No, that's not at all what is meant or described by this word. It is not a mommy dearest, kind of like when was it Christy or whatever that girl's name was it Christy? Christine? Christina. Oh, some of y'all read the book. Or the movie, when that little girl goes and, like the kids pull the covers up over their heads, or she goes and runs and hides, crumpled up, that is not what this word is at all. Rather, think of, so we described this a couple words, I don't remember, it was a couple weeks ago, we talked about, I think it was in our honor series, we talked about or that message on honor. It brings with it the sense of honor, respect, or reverence, or think in the terms of not an unhealthy fear like mommy dearest, but think about what are healthy fears, like the fear of heights. Can we agree that's a healthy fear, right? When you get to the top of a ladder. Now, I know that there's a little sign, maybe I've never read it. There's actually a sign that says, do not go above this step. Do you know you're actually not supposed to step on all the steps of a step ladder? I didn't know that for a long time. And because of that, I have learned how to stand on all the steps of the ladder. And sometimes we stand on the higher steps of the ladder and you lose a healthy sense of fear, right? And what happens when you lose a healthy sense? Danger, Will Robinson. To quote old movies, since we're on the thing. There's a danger at hand. When you work on a roof, you should have a healthy sense of fear of falling off of said roof. When you go mountain climbing, you should have a healthy sense of fear. When you start a fire anywhere, whether it be at a campground or in your house or on your grill, you should have a healthy sense of fear. Anybody here burnt their eyebrows or their hair on the home grill? Yeah, it happens. You got to have a healthy. We get so used to grilling out and so used to barbecuing, we forget that this is a live flame and there is gas shooting through this. For those who really know how to barbecue with gas, I don't got that kind of time. Sorry, but there are healthy fears that we should have. Healthy fear of firearms. You should have a healthy fear of firearm. If you ever handle a firearm, you don't just wave that thing around. You need to know how to handle a firearm. It is a dangerous thing. There's also, healthy fear of, things like talking back to your mother. You should have a healthy fear of that. That's kind of what we're getting at this morning. There's another, and all this kind of goes around a healthy fear of authority. So, for sinful humanity to be able to live in community with other sinful people, there is a requirement for some sense of structure and authority. Is that a fair statement? For sinful humanity To live in community with one another, there has to be a structure and an order and a set of rules or guidelines and the authority to enforce them. Is that a fair statement? No. I say that because that's not 100% agreed upon right now. There are municipalities right now that are experimenting with taking away consequences to breaking that structure. And so you have no bail laws, and you have we're not going to enforce misdemeanor crimes, and etc. And do we find that in light of that crime goes down or goes up? It's going up, and businesses are moving out, and chaos is ensuing as a result of some of these experiments, I would say. And that's just sort of the reality of life. Society breaks down when you take away an understanding of the dangers of breaking said structure. So what I'm getting at is, in the home, one of the responsibilities of a parent is to teach their children that this is a dangerous world. Everything around them is dangerous. I would say, isn't it fair to say, like, your job as a parent of a birth through 2-year-old is to try to keep them from killing themselves? Right? And it's such an impossible task. You need help doing this. That's why you have to put up gates and put things over electrical sockets. We call it, child-proofing a home, right? Now, there's a limit to that. Really, those are supposed to be aids because you can't do it every second of the day, right? And you're supposed to kind of move from child-proofing things to instructing them of all of the dangers around them. And so what we're getting at is a healthy sense of fear moves you to the reality that you must learn about something, okay, that there's something to learn. So for instance, when I took scuba diving lessons, pretty much scuba diving lessons are week after week of, hey, somebody did this and they died. Somebody did this and now they can't breathe anymore. Somebody did this and they had really bad problems. Everything about it is, I don't know why on earth you would ever want to do this, but if you do, here's all of the things you got to worry about, right? There's everything that can kill you. Going up too fast, going down without breathing, not having the right equipment. So all of scuba training is about, here's what you should fear, and here, therefore, is what you need to learn. Like, why do I have to learn this? Why do I have to know all this stuff? They're pretty good at telling you why. Because there's a fear that should be attached to all of it. And if you're a good instructor, the instructor is going to instill in you that sense of fear. And so fear leads to a sense of learning, because the beginning of wisdom is a healthy fear, or a healthy understanding of reality. When I say that fear is very closely tied to a sense of reality. Does that make sense? You see how everything around you is a danger. Is that a fair statement? Everything around you is a danger, okay? The words you say, you can't take back. You need to be careful with your words, because the words you say can be dangerous to you or to others. You can get thrown in jail, and you can lose relationships over the words that you say. The places that you go, if you don't look left and right before you cross the street, there is a danger. There is a danger all around you, whether it be relationally or physically or emotionally or spiritually. There are dangers all around. That's the reality of the world in which we live. And your job as a parent is to teach them about the dangers of the world in which we live and all that is around them. Because the foundation of learning, the foundation of knowledge is a understanding of reality and all the things that can hurt you and all the things that can be a problem. But, and here's the other issue with it, fools despise, they reject instruction and discipline. Fools reject instruction and discipline. The word despise means to reject, to resist, to push back. And every parent knows this is not a learned behavior, it's a natural behavior, right? Fair statement? Resisting authority, resisting discipline, resisting any kind of structure is not a learned behavior. It is just a natural reaction to things. But it's not until we've suffered some sense of reality that we are much more teachable. Dave Ramsey says, I learned far more about money going bankrupt than I ever did in school. Why? Because you got a serious dose of reality. It hits you. Most successful business entrepreneurs have failed at business at least once before. Why? Because you didn't really learn all the things and pay attention to all the things you need to learn until after you'd gone through that failure. So, what's this look like? We've got kids who are now raised in a society, in a world where they've got more information than ever, more freedom than ever, and less self-control than ever. Fair statement? And it's because there is a breakdown or a struggle in our society with parents giving this kind of structure and understanding about reality of the world around them. And you begin by teaching them, yeah, if you put your finger in that light socket, it's going to hurt. You pull that down, it's going to hit your head. And you begin there, and you're going through, and like I'm teaching my kids about used car salesmen, okay? And the fact that they're always out looking for an edge and what to look out for when you're going to make deals. There's dangers at every stage of the thing. Now, I'm going to put with this Proverbs 19:18. It says, I'm going to read the NIV since that's the translation I normally read, but then I'm going to kind of give you the Hebrew. Can be a very difficult language to translate into English sometimes because I would relate it to, this is going to sound offensive, but it's sort of like a caveman language. It is a very old language, okay? And because it is such an old language, it sometimes gets translated very rough, okay? So for instance, it says, discipline your children for in that there is hope. Don't be a willing party to their death. It's a very, it's kind of like the caveman rough version of it. A better sort of modern, or I would say modern, that doesn't sound right. A better translation into English, it would be something like, discipline your children while they are young, or while there's still hope, or while there's still time, okay? If you don't, you're leading to them destroying their lives. I mean, you can sort of come back to it. For the kid who has not learned to look left and right, or it's going to come up later, one of the things that always shook me as a parent is before my kids were born, a pastor was telling a story about they were meeting at a strip mall. That's where their church was, like one of those strip malls, and had a family with kids that were very unruly and never listened, and one of the kids ran out the front doors of the church, right into the parking lot, got hit by a car and killed. That's why one of the things that my kids could get spanked for is running in a parking lot. Just not having it, period, okay? We're going to have a healthy sense of fear when we walk into a parking lot because the reality of and I would say to them, this spanking will hurts a lot less than a car hitting you, right? We'll talk about spanking in a minute, but there's only 3 things you get spanked for, and running in a parking lot was one of them. Why? Because of the reality that's out there, the danger that is out there is so true. And what he's saying in this verse is, if you do not discipline your child while they're young, you're setting themselves up for not understanding the realities of the danger of the world around them. And eventually it will come back to bite them, to hurt them, to hit them, smack them in the face, so to speak. On this principle, one of the best books I read when my kids were young was a book by James Dobson called Dare to Discipline. I think it's been rewritten 12 times, like the new Dare to Discipline, the revised Dare to Discipline, the updated Dare to Discipline for the 21st century. I don't know how many times the publisher can reissue it and get more money out of it, but the core knowledge is really good. And in here he talks about the necessity to parent when the children are between the ages of 1 to 5. And all of the lessons that are first being taught between 1 to 5 are the foundation of everything else later on. And if you don't do it then, you'll find it's really hard to do it later on. And he traces back this child who was completely unruly at 13, and they asked the mother, says, when did this start? And says, goes back to when he's 3 years old, and the child would spit in her face. You got to do something about that, right? It's kind of funny. Every parent ooh. Every parent went, ooh. It was like, oh, no, right? You knew exactly what you would do if that happened to you. Is that a fair statement, right? For the other parents who went, I can't believe, This message is for you this morning, for those parents, right? And in there he says, when your child has a battle of the wills, okay? This is the no, the defiance, who says so, you can't make me. I'll never forget that one of the lines I read out of the book says, you must win that battle and win decisively. They must know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are the parent and they are not. And if they do not know it then, you will battle this the rest of their life. Worst of all, they will be fighting this battle the rest of their life. And we all can see this. I mean, I don't have to preach at all in this moment to say, can you identify people that you've met in your life that never had a healthy sense of talking back to their mama, right? You know who those people are. You just know that instinctively. There were 3 things that you could get spanked for in my house. One I already mentioned was running in the parking lot. Second one was lying. Third one was this defiance. This, no, I will not. I won't do it. You can't make me. And so whenever we would have a consequence, we're talking about consequence in a minute, whenever we'd have a consequence, I'd say, okay, you didn't do this, and the consequence for that is you lose this privilege, but you lied about it, and so I have to spank you now. Or, but when I told you that, you talked back, and so there's a spanking for that. It was always talked about how this is a separate thing. Whenever I would catch the lie or the defiance, it was going to be one and one decisively. And I reserved spanking for just those three things. Now, whether you not believe in spanking or not, that's your own choice and your own decision. Of course, it should never be done out of anger. It should always be done in a corrective mode. It should always be done under control, and should never be done with the intent to physically injure the child. You can go down all the list of those things. However, you need to have some way of making sure you win that battle and win it decisively, whatever that looks like for you. Because when they don't have a healthy understanding of the dangers and the realities of the life around them, they will be set up for failure. So it says the fear is the beginning of knowledge. And so fear of the world and the reality around them, part of that reality ultimately is going to become an understanding of who God is. You need to understand who God is and the reality of the fact that this world, He's what He created. And if you don't have a right understanding and a relationship with God, that's going to set you up for failure throughout your life. And so that's kind of what that verse is about, but how I would apply it to the home. The second foundational passage comes from Galatians 6:7, yeah. And that is, you will reap what you sow. You will reap what you sow. In other words, the natural way of saying is, actions have consequences. What you give out is what you are going to get back. What you do is going to have some ramification down the road. Now, is it fair to say that our society struggles with this concept? We want to be able to do without any consequence for the doing. Now, when you don't understand this law, okay, when you don't understand the law of sowing and reaping, right, you're going to think that people are cruel or unfair. So when you do something, and then that gets a response out of somebody, you think, when you don't understand that your actions have a consequence, that what you do resulted in this, you're going to think they're just arbitrarily being cruel or unfair to you, okay? When you don't understand this principle, you're going to think that life is unfair to you. Well, it's not fair that I don't have the opportunities. It's not fair that I can't go. It's not fair that they're not letting me. No, it's sowing and reaping that's at play. And then ultimately, when you don't understand this principle, you're going to look to God and think that God is being unjust or unfair to you when you begin to read through the realities of what is to come in your life. And so if you don't understand this, you're going to always be struggling with life. Now, as a parent, we would think, oh, this is an easy thing to show. However, there is a trend in parents, kind of as illustrated by the Mean Girls clip, where parents, I'm the fun mom, there's no rules in this house. And then you walk in, and where is the girl living in the house? In the parents' bedroom. How many of y'all were abhorrent in seeing that? Right? Or when the girl just tells her mom, basically, be quiet and go away. There's an issue there. Now, another great book I read when I was going through this years ago is Dr. Kevin Lehman's book called Making Your Children Mind Without Losing Yours. He's got the same book in a different title. I've read both of them, and they're basically the same. You ever had an author who writes the same bit of information, but they get more money out of it by retitling it? His other book's called Have a New Kid by Friday. But everything he talks in there is about instilling logical consequences for your child's actions. And he's really big on, if your child forgets their lunch, don't bring them the lunch. If they forget their homework, don't bring them their homework. Oh, I know. It's cruel, isn't it? Rather, he says, they need to learn how to handle that conversation with their teacher and the grade that's going to follow, right? Because what's parenting about? You're teaching them reality or not reality? What happens when you forget to pay your light bill? Does the power lady come over and remind you to pay it, or do they just come over and turn your power off? That's reality in life. When you break a rule, you lose the privilege. When you spend all your money, you have no money. And I know it's painful to watch a child who can't buy something that they really want But when you spin it here, you have to understand the consequences. You don't have it here. And you have to be able to put these things in. Now, you are not called to protect your kid from consequences. You are called to prepare them for reality. And reality is actions have consequences. What you sow, you will reap. And what you're teaching them is that what you sowed can be bailed out. What you sow can be avoided. That's not the reality out there. At the end of the day, we are called into account for the life we've lived before God. Now, is there grace? Yes. But there's grace for a time. It's not unending. And so in his book, he talks about how you need to be able to talk about it. There's a couple, like 4 principles with this. First is you need to talk about ahead of time what the consequences for behaviors are. And he says, so it begins with you as parents. If there's 2 parents in the home or whoever's parenting the child, you need to talk about it. Furthermore, I can tell you this from both other books I've read and experiences I've had, is if you're in a blended family, you then need to further talk about how you will discipline each of your kids. You know, if it's your kids, my kids, our kids, you know, there's different ways to go about that. You need to be on the same page and have talked about how you're going to go about carrying out discipline, especially in a blended family. Even in a regular biological mother and father family, you still need to talk about what are the consequences, because it can't be where if you get in trouble by dad, he lowers the hammer on you, and if you get in trouble by mom, well, then she lets you get off easy. You can't have that. You both have to have the same consequences, and you have to talk about them ahead of time, because let's face it, sometimes kids, what's the right word? Move you to emotion. Right? And when you're moved to emotion, sometimes you will want to enact a consequence out of proportion with what they've done, or one that you know you can't follow through with. You are grounded for life, mister, right? I don't want that any more than they want that. Right? Is that a fair statement? Like, yeah. I mean, as much as I, will use their electronic devices to take them away, sometimes I want them to have them. Don't leave me hanging out here. You know you do, right? So, you need to talk about it ahead of time. They must be clear and predictable, okay? When my kids don't do their chores, they know their phones are getting turned off. They just know. They just know. There was a time, I don't remember what it was, where one of my kids just literally walked downstairs, put the phone on the table, and walked back up to his room. I didn't have to say it. He knew. He knew. You do that, this is the result. Now that I can digitally shut their phones off, I don't even have to have them bring them down. Sometimes I do just for the show of it or the sense of the loss. But you can remotely just shut down a phone. It's glorious. Get those parental controls. Whenever chores wouldn't be done, I wouldn't even say, I wouldn't raise my voice. I would just go in and shut down the phone. As soon as the phone would be shut down, you'd hear feet come down the stairs. First couple times, they come down and say, "What's going on? Is the internet up? What happened?" And then we're like, "Well, you tell me why it would be shut down." And then eventually it became the phone would get shut down, and they would just come down and they'd look around. What did I not do? What did I not do? I know there's something down here. Because when you have very clear, this is the consequence for this action, you're teaching them about reality, that this behavior will result in this. You do this in marriage, this happens. You do this with your finances, this happens. You do this with your chores, this happens. You're teaching them about actions and consequences. Which then brings out another nice thing is, it then becomes us versus the consequence, not me versus you. Right? We used to do movie night on Friday night, and I'd go all out with movie night. The kids would get a candy cup. Candy cup is great because then you can buy all the cheap candy and put it in a cup instead of the individual wrap, which costs more. Anyway, so we do a candy cup and popcorn, which is also cheap. It's a good filler. So a lot of popcorn and a few M&Ms and little mini Snickers. They get their big old candy cup. We'd have a movie. I'd show them old 80s movies so they could be indoctrinated to real cinema. But you got to be careful because 80 standards before PG-13 are different. So anyway, we'd have our movie night. But one of the consequences for not doing chores was you miss movie night, or one of the consequences for not going to bed on time was you miss movie night. And I remember one week I had to sit down. I was like, "Hey, buddy, I'm really sorry, man. We didn't get to bed on time this week, so you got to go to bed while your brother and sister get to watch movies. I hate that for you, man, because I had a good candy cup tonight. It was a lot of the good stuff, not as much popcorn." right? And this is gonna be a good movie. You know, maybe sometime you can watch this movie another time when your brother, sister are at grandma's house or something. But man, you're gonna miss out. Short Circuit was a good one, right? Number 5, information. You know, in this day and age, yeah. So anyways, it's us versus the consequences, right? Next thing is be consistent with carrying out the consequences. It does no good to have a consequence you don't carry out. You are distorting reality for them, which is all the more reason why you can't threaten something major that you know you can't go through with. I will leave you here. Legally, I can't, okay? Like, you've got to be careful with these consequences. But when you don't carry it out, you're training your child to understand that actions don't actually have full consequences. There's always a way to get out of it. Third of all is you need to differentiate between accidents and defiance. There should always be grace for accidents, and there should always be discipline for the defiance. Now, what I mean by that is, who here accidentally backed into your dad's car or something, right? Remember that time where you scratched your dad's car and he just went off on you for it? Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah. Okay, that's not a disciplinary moment, okay? It was an accident, okay? They dropped it. They messed up. It's not, you don't lower the boom with consequences for an accident. There's a very difference between an accident and no, I will not spit in the face. There's a very big difference. Can we agree on that? And so the reaction should be different as well. And then lastly is that discipline is not punishment. I know these two words sound almost identical, but discipline is not punishment. Punishment is, I will make you pay for what you have done. Okay? Discipline, however, is about, remember earlier when it says, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Okay? That word in the Hebrew, instruction and discipline, is the same word. And that's because all discipline is instructionary. All punishment is not. Does that make sense? The purpose of discipline is to instruct, to learn, to do differently next time. Every discipline you have should be about where you're going next and the behavior you want to see in the future, not, I will make you pay for what you've done. And sometimes it felt as though when you scratched Dad's car with your bike when you were putting it away and you didn't see it and you didn't see it, you're being punished for what you did. And it's very different with discipline. My favorite definition of discipline, as I sometimes butcher but often love, is discipline is the artificial application and amplification of the consequences of wrongdoing before the actual consequences of wrongdoing are such that they might harm or scar them for life. I want to artificially amplify the consequences while they're young. Take away something so they understand doing this loses something. I want to amplify those before the natural consequences, like running through traffic and getting hit by a car, are such they'll scar you for life. So to summarize out, Hebrews 12:11, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but later it will produce a harvest of righteousness. So in your homes, teach them authority, because if they don't understand authority, they will always struggle with their relationship with God. Teach them about sowing and reaping. Well, you have to understand actions have consequences, because the reality is they do. And you will give them a foundation that will carry them on for the rest of their life. Will you join me as we close our time in prayer? Father, I thank you for your grace over us. I thank you, Lord, that you have led us, that you have parented us with the same kind of love and this grace. That all these things that are foundational for a healthy life ultimately set us up for a right relationship with you. That we might have a healthy sense of awe, respect, and fear for the fact that you hold our very life and our eternal future in your hands. But that we also might know, Father, just how much you love us. For true discipline is an extension of love. So, Father, may we teach these things in our home to set up our children for the best opportunity to have a right relationship with reality and with you for all eternity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.